know maybe two things or two words that describe how you're feeling today. And I'll model I'm feeling relieved because I've had a really busy day. I'm also super excited for this conversation. But let's get the chat going and we'll get started in just a minute. Also, make sure you're messaging everyone when you introduce yourself so that nobody misses your mood. Welcome, Rebecca. See Terry, Catherine, lots of folks joining. And from what's exciting about the virtual world is even though this is ComNetDC, we are able to welcome all sorts of folks from around the country. All right. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started since we have so much to get to. And again, if for people just joining, let us know your name, where you're from, and a couple words about how you're feeling today in the chat so you all can get to know each other. But for now, I just want to say welcome ComNetDC and thanks so much for joining us today. We're really thrilled at all the interest that you've shown and this very exciting panel about how to be and think like a CCO with two terrific CCOs taking time to join us today. My name is Kate Shatskin. I'm a senior communications manager at the Annie E. Casey Foundation in Baltimore in my day job. And here I'm one of the leaders of ComNetDC. And I want to thank my partners in crime at ComNetDC, including Liz Ott, who you'll see showing up today to monitor the chat and include some of your questions, as well as Alex McLennan, Emily Chow, Melanie Starkey, and Jessica Zetzman, all of whom have helped put this together today in one way or another. And of course, I want to thank our illustrious CCOs for joining us, and DeFabio Doyle from the Pew Charitable Trusts. She's Senior Vice President and CCO there. And another important title of Ann's is that she is a former leader of ComNetDC, just recently departed. So we thank her for that as well. And I'd also like to welcome Frank Tramble, who is Vice President of Communications and CCO at Howard University. Very excited to see both of them today. Before we dive into questions, just a couple housekeeping notes. We're expecting lots of folks today. We already have up to 100 of you on. So we're going to ask you all to stay on mute and use the chat to ask questions. You don't have to wait to put those in. Just get going on the conversation. We'll start out with some questions from me for the panelists, and then we'll go to your questions. So why did we want to talk about Chief Communications Officers today, and why do we think this would be of interest to our network? Well, the title of Chief Communications Officer really, I believe, started in the corporate sector and has gradually, I think, become more prevalent as corporations really started to realize, especially in the digital world that moves at such a rapid pace, that communications is more than just making things pretty. It's more than a tactic. It's really essential to business success and business objectives. And mission-driven organizations like the ones we all are part of and care about have started to adopt this thinking as well. And so we're seeing more and more organizations elevate the title of Chief Communications Officer to really communicate the fact that communications belongs in the C-suite. It belongs at the senior leadership table. And if it's not there, you know, organizations really are missing out on opportunities, and they're also not insulated from crises in the way that they should be. So we realize, though, that many of you here on this call are in all different places in your career. And whether you're just starting out, or you're in a shop of one, or you're at mid-level in your career, really you may be wondering, so how does the Chief Communications Officer apply to me? But what we really want to do with these wonderful speakers today is to go to the balcony and get the view that they're seeing from their place, where they're really thinking about their business goals and objectives, and how can we all apply that thinking to the work that we do every day? How can we help our own Chief Communications Officer, or if we're a shop of one, or how can we help our CEO? How can we develop skills that will help us advance in our career by thinking about these very important strategic decisions and anticipating those trends? So that's why we're here today, and we hope that you'll ask questions about all of those things. But I think it's going to be a really rich conversation. So let's dive in. And we shared the official bios for Anne and Frank in our invitation, and I think Liz is going to throw those into the chat too. But what we really want now is the unofficial bio. We want the real story in a couple of minutes from these two about what your journey has been. How did you get to where you are, and kind of what were the important steps that you took? And I think we're going to start with Frank, and then we'll go to Anne. So Frank, why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. So, I fell into the higher education side of my career early on. In fact, my first job inside of communications was as a telemarketer for the college that I went to, which was Michigan State University. And so, we had a unique program where there was over 250 students working. And so it wasn't the particular small shop that you had, that a lot of institutions have. It was a pretty big kind of feeder system, and it was inside of that, which was inside of the marketing communications department at Michigan State, that I started to really learn what it was that I wanted to do. Fast forward down the line after graduation and a couple jobs outside, I decided to go back to the university and work in the communications and marketing department there. And really started, I've held I feel like every position I could hold up going up the chain. And found myself, from going from Michigan State over to Georgetown, where I spent the last 7 years prior to me coming to Howard, and then joining Howard here in the fall, and or in the this past fall, excuse me. And my journey has always been one that was really trying to understand. I always knew that I wanted to be a chief communications officer, but I think the harder part of communications is finding where you fit in every single shop. No shop is really the same. You get into positions where you may be an executor on only the digital side, and at a certain point, it was really important to have the collateral pieces and mail, and so that was a portion that I had to go and learn, and I switched jobs to learn more about that. And as we continue to evolve in communications, I found that I had to continue teaching myself new skills, because if the position itself that I was holding at the time didn't particularly, give me that, I had to find a lot of different ways outside of that to continue to expand my skill set, so I was prepared for a position like this.
Great. And Anne, what about you? Tell us your real story.
Yeah, well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's great to see the names popping up. It's such a great audience tonight. So Frank and I know we're really excited about this. It's great to be here. I feel like my path was a little more iterative. I love hearing when Frank and other people like really knew this was their zone and they were working their way up. I was always a words person. Like, I really liked writing and literature, and after school, I thought I'd go into publishing, but that wasn't working. And I kind of ended up in marketing and then communications, PR more in San Francisco, and kind of starting out my career really because I needed money to get out of my parents' house and to move into San Francisco with my friends and actually start having a good time. So it wasn't like I was very purposeful I was still job hunting for a long time, kind of trying to figure out, is this it for me? But I think as I learned more and more about PR, and I really was like a spokesperson doing kind of classic media relations and engagement early in my career, I started to realize, oh, wait, maybe I'm doing okay at this and I like it. And it combines a lot of things I do enjoy, particularly the writing. So, then I kind of started thinking about policy, and I became very mission oriented about international issues and US policy. And for a while, I considered kind of a policy focus in my career. And it wasn't really till after grad school that I realized I wanted to merge those two things. Like, I liked policy and I liked mission orientation, but I really was good at comms. And so that was the right place for me. But it took me a little while to get there. And I think that's fine. I think a little meandering as you learn, and Frank was talking about just kind of ongoing learning. I think that's such an important thread for this conversation, particularly for communicators today. There's you always have to keep learning, but I think you know, that's something you learn as you're going, and then it starts to settle a little more. That was my experience.
Great. Well, thank you. It's really good to hear the kind of behind the bio. So let's move to the next question. And this, we'll call on Anne first for this one. So what's on your mind as a pressing communications challenge or opportunity? And I guess the challenge here will be picking the first one or just one to talk about.
Yeah, I would say right now I spend a lot of time thinking about the future workforce. So I'm at Pew. We have a terrific team. I see some Pew colleagues on. Thank you guys for joining and actually listening to me again today. You know, I want to make sure we're thinking about not just what we need tomorrow or a month from now, but really, I think part of the CCO job is to try to project what is the organization going to need from communications in 5 years and even beyond. And that's a hard thing to do right now in comms, but to try to start figuring out the positions and how to flex them. And along with that, how to allow team members to have opportunities to grow and again, learn. And so because I think the industry is evolving so much, I do spend a lot of time thinking about what I would call kind of T-shaped. I want broad people and I want some deep people, meaning broad, you might be a PR generalist, really, I could plug you into kind of any issue area we work on. You're going to kill it. You know the toolbox, you're going to bring creative ideas. A deep person might be, you know, the Twitter expert or Instagram or like a really deep expertise in a particular creative approach or area. How do I kind of combine those skill sets in the workforce and then let people flex in them too? So I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Great. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, you know, Anne hit it right on the head. You know, a lot of the time that you know, we spend is, and me in particular, is thinking about that next kind of nature. You know, what happens, and I think we all have been in these positions. You know, when you're inside of under-resourced teams, which communications in many shops is normally one of the under-resourced teams, you end up just putting out fires every single day, and it's that routine fire put out kind of situation that causes you to stop thinking so far down the line and actually losing a little bit of hope, honestly, in a lot of cases to see what's happening further and further down the line. And it gets you into a place where you're just reactive. And, you know, something comes, I handle that. I just need to get through the day and then we get back. Part of the, you know, my role is finding time no matter what to think about what's the next move. Even though this is a situation we're dealing with now, is that how we should always deal with that situation? You know, what are we leaning toward on the evolution of whether it's the public relations arm that we're working with or the communications and marketing plan that we're working with? You know, for instance, at Howard, one of our major goals is to really have the institution have a comprehensive, its first comprehensive fundraising campaign, which is a different kind of beast for Howard. And I've luckily been a part of 3 campaigns before. So, you know, that's something I'm thinking about it. You know, when we think about positions, you know, it's not just about the position I need, but it's also the position I know I'm going to need in a year or 2 from now. And again, as we talked about earlier, the communications field is just constantly changing. And if you're not keeping yourself in tune on what those changes are, then it's also difficult for you to know what those next pieces will be. And I think that's something that we, you know, at least me and myself, I look at it every single day when I walk into the office, or the office bedroom, as we all know too.
For sure. And no, that's important. It leads into our next question. But first, I just want to mention one thing, which I neglected to mention at the top, which is that this session is being recorded. Want to make sure everybody knows that. And I also understand that because we've had so much interest in this session, there are some folks who can't get in because we've literally exceeded the ComNet Zoom limit. So I apologize for that. Those who are on, but just for the record, I think our recording will be that much more important for, unfortunately, those who have tried to join us and not been able to. So sorry for that brief segue, but Frank, I think, you know, it's we'll continue on to the next question, which really leads out of what you were just saying, which is, so as a CCO, what would you say you do every day? What's a typical day or a somewhat typical day? And how are you finding those spaces for that strategic thinking that you mentioned is so important, and yet the time is so elusive?
You know, it's kind of different for every single person. And again, I think a lot of what your role will be as a CCO will depend on the makeup of the organization and the needs that happen right now. I know what my days look like in this year will look very different down the line as you resource and can kind of put your efforts into the right areas. That may change. I spend a lot of my time going back and forth between the strategic side of what visionary piece we should be doing, trying to then align the budgetary resources to go there, because people love the idea of a really great strategic communications plan, for a longevity amount of time. But at the same time, they don't love the bill that it comes with when you talk about the actual positions you need in order to stand those things up. So you're supported. And then on the other side too, I spend time, trying to also educate and teach my team too. I think one of the big roles that you have as a chief communications officer is that you're experienced and well-versed in a lot of different resources and being able to bring those resources and connections to your team. So there's a lot of moments where, if my team doesn't understand how to fix a particular problem, I may be able to jump in there and actually either guide them through that, and as we try to grow the actual expertise on the team as well, we, connecting them to other resources that I may have and other people that I have. One of the nice things about working in the higher education market is it's not as competitive as the for-profit market. And I think that I use that to my advantage, meaning I am willing to share more because we face similar problems, but we're not really going after the same target market of people. So that allows us to be a little bit more forthcoming with what those problems are. And so for relationships I built at other organizations, problems I know that someone else had, I'm able to connect people across different units, organizations, institutions, et cetera, to try to talk and learn from each other so that knowledge base gets up too. So it's different every single day. But that's also one of the reasons why I like the job.
What about you, Anne? What do you think? What's your day like?
I'm with you, Frank, totally. I think a lot of communicators like this, like every day is a little different, and I enjoy that. I drink a lot of coffee and then I get going. But yeah, I think of course there's the priority list, and we were actually having a conversation before the event started. You got your plan of the day, you've got your stuff, and then something blows up or is unexpected and you're pivoting, or you wake up Monday morning and now you've got something to deal with that was not on your priority list for the week. And we all just have to adapt and change like that, and that is part of the job, and it makes it fun. It also makes it stressful. I'm sure a lot of people, you're about to go out to a social event and now the media calls come in and your evening is ruined. We've all had those kind of experiences. But I am a big fan of trying to find space where I'm just not in react mode, because, you can spend all day in your inbox, but that is not going to move the needle for your organization. And I have days I'm in my inbox the whole day. So I'm not talking about every day. I as like my team is probably fond of me saying is, I don't like to be on my heels. I like to advance first, right? So I want to have that proactive plan. I want to be trying to think around corners. What do we need to do next? And then I also try to carve out some time when I'm not, in meetings or talking with staff members about what else is going on in the world right now. I try to find some time each week to look at other organizations, many of whom have representatives on this call, are doing terrific things, digital, social media, great stories in the press. Always trying to think like, how did that happen? Can I reach out to someone to learn a little bit more about what they're doing? And that's not a lot of the time, but I think it's important. And I would encourage people to try to find that too, and just in your own job. It's not a CCO thing. It's just a thing. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly Right. And that's where I think we wanted to go next. So stepping out of the specific CCO role, what are the skills and attributes that you think you need in this advancement journey that anybody can be thinking about developing now that will position you no matter who you are? Maybe we'll take Anne first on this one.
Yeah, sure. I would say the job is important, but it's not everything. And what I mean by that is you're going to have your roles and responsibilities, and you go kill it with those, right? Do the best job you can do. But it's kind of what else is going on. Few of us advance in a linear way. Well, Frank did. He just went up the ladder, and I think that's amazing. But a lot of us are kind of meandering over here and then going up and then maybe taking a sideways. So what I've tried to do throughout my career, and I've been really lucky this way, is try to find a couple of people in my life who are my sounding boards, who are like, they're smart, I admire them. They may not even be in communication, some of them are not, but I can reach out to them and try to get a sense. And I've done so in critical points in my career. Like, I'm not sure about this, I'm starting to feel this way. Like, can you give me some advice or help me think beyond just my experience right now? And I would say that ComNet's great for that. There's a lot of other places people find a lot of other affiliation groups, even community neighborhood groups or just friends. So I would encourage people to try to find over time, those important sounding boards who can stay with you and support you in a way, help you see a different lens on what you're looking at and the possibilities.
What do you think, Frank? What are those critical skills that someone could start working on right now?
Yeah. I think one, it is being forward-looking in general, and that's something you can be in any position. One of the things that I constantly look at with all of my teams are, you kind of end up knowing who's the person that's just, I only care about this thing. And therefore, you don't really bring anything. You don't bring those people into some of your strategic conversations. And so when you start to see on your team, who are the people that are looking past just what they're doing, but how does this affect the whole? And you kind of hone in on those individuals. And I know I tend to pull them a little bit closer because that's a lot of the work that I have to do. So it's better to kind of bring them close. And I think it's important for us to understand what our weaknesses are. There's no CCO who has experience, and I mean in terms of I've owned every single bit of every part of communications. If you are a writer, I don't expect you to know everything about videography. And as even with myself, I don't know every single bit about in terms of the details of every single part. That's why you hire experts. That's why you build teams. However, I know what my weaknesses were, and I spent a lot of time understanding as much as I possibly can about every single one of those roles. And so while, I may not be the best videographer, I couldn't tell you the exact camera to get, but can I go out and actually shoot something, edit it down, and and do a pretty decent job at it? Yes, I can, because I've spent time doing that. And I think one of the things you have to look at in your career, and it is what you're responsible for at work doesn't necessarily mean that's your only opportunity to learn those things. I learned most of what I felt rounded me out outside of my current jobs. And it was because I continued to just work in those spaces and volunteer time and to help others and build campaigns and such when I didn't have that responsibility. Going back to grad school specifically to look what are the skill sets that I may wanted to just educate myself on, because there's a learning curve that continues to happen because communication changes every 5 years. If you look at back 5 years ago to what's going to be 5 years from now, it'll be completely different again. So there's a lot of that I think is important in your skill sets, is just knowing who you are as a communicator, your strengths, and then understanding your weaknesses so you can be effective in the role.
Yeah, that's very true. So now we're going to talk about all the stuff that's been going on in the last year and how this has changed your job and how you think about the future of communications and just what's top of mind to advise your business executives, that wasn't a year ago. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic. We've had a racial reckoning. We've had a new administration. We've had, a crisis in democracy, just a few things to deal with. So maybe Frank, you could go first.
So just how we've handled all these things. It's been you have to be flexible. Again, I can't express how important that is. We walk in, again, as Ann talked about, knowing what we're going to do, also expecting that everything that we plan for can just completely blow up with one phone call. That's a part of the fun, but also a part of the necessity to kind of handle those things. And I think what you do, and I will say that there's no real positives, I should say, about a lot of the things that we talked about, but you can find wins in some of the issues that your organizations are dealing with. And I think one of those things is really honing in on who the identity is for every single one of these opportunities. I think, or one of these, issues. And each one of those issues, you're able to then have an opportunity to then redefine or more clearly define who your organization is and what is it and where do they stand on some of these issues, which is important because that not only helps you have further brand clarity, but it gives you opportunities. You have to be able to see kind of an opportunity in every single situation. Even if it's terrible, we have to find, well, what's the opportunity that we can use here in order to continue to advance the overall strategy, whether it's going deeper into who we are. This is a situation we've already talked about. We can reference the fact that we've always stood on this matter, or it may have to be an organizational shift. We have not talked about these things. We need to be authentic about that and use that authenticity to bring our community closer together. So the overall goal of your institution, your company, your whatever organization you work for, actually brings everyone to a positive place at the end of the day, which is what your goal is all the time.
What would you say, Anne? What's really changed in your mind, especially about how you can contribute after all this?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back over the past year, I mean, we had a new CEO take the helm. Sue Uran started in July, while we were all working from home. Now, she's a long-term Pew person, which was great. So there wasn't that kind of like just learning the organization bit. But then I became CCO in September. And again, I've been at Pew 8 years now. So it wasn't new, but our roles changed. And I had to shift my own thinking. Sue is now on Twitter. We didn't have a CEO on Twitter before. That was something we worked with her on. It was really exciting. It was one of my goals to kind of showcase a new part of Pew, really, like how our culture is changing and how we're more accessible and open than we had been many years ago. But as issues happen, now I'm parsing through things I hadn't thought about before. What is the CEO voice? What is the organization's voice? As Frank saying, are we in this or not in this? What's true as an organization and our equities as what we bring to the table, where we invest in research or giving. So these things have to align, I think. And I'm not a fan of kind of like talking without the substance behind it. I know many of the communicators here aren't, because we're in those kind of organizations where if you're going to say it, you want to do it. So I think that's been really important to think about. I love that Frank mentioned authenticity because, look, I mean, I'm on many calls, video calls where like one of my children walks in and, is showing her craft or something. And I'm trying to like see very important things and it's all distracting. And everyone's been lovely. We've all seen each other in like 360 ways we never have been before. So that's very new. And I think for our industry, it will have impact, like the way we look at those kind of transformations over time. I think also, and I'll be kind of interested to see what happens, there could be that sort of other side where people want more polish and more sophistication. And I kind of try to think about where are we going to invest in those kind of things, which is really the more like, high end kind of, is it a high-end video, or is there something that just feels kind of glossy and right? Or are we sort of in this authentic, more raw place for a while? And I'll just mention hybrid work. You know, that's not a communication thing. That's a world thing we're all dealing with in organizations. I'm really spending some time. I don't have any easy answers. No one does, but like, communicators, we like to brainstorm, we get in a room, you know, we like to feed off each other. There's a lot of energy. We have done that virtually. I do miss being in a room with my colleagues. I miss the whiteboard. And so I'm kind of interested, like, how will we do that in the right way that lets people have flexibility and really suits their lifestyle, you know, while also kind of being true to what we need to be effective. So those are that's a big challenge, but a big opportunity coming forward.
Wow, that is great. We have so many questions in the chat. So I want to go to Liz, who's been keeping track of all of that as I've seen it whiz by. And wondering, Liz, if you can pick out a few to just give to our panel.
Sure, there's been so many, and chat is not easy to copy from Zoom, just for those of you for reference. I'm going to start with some of the early ones, and then we can see what we have time for. And one of the first one is around master's programs, and they were curious to hear about whether or not you both think it's something that is important in terms of rising up in the ranks, and if so, if you have any good suggestions on that front.
Yeah, I can start with that one. You know, I currently teach at Georgetown's Integrated Marketing Communications program, which is their master's program for communications. And, you know, I can't stress enough the importance. It's kind of the need. I think the question really isn't, you know, about getting a master's, but why are you getting a master's? I think that's really more of it, because I can say I graduated with people that didn't really have an understanding of why they got it, and you can see in their career paths it didn't get them to, or at least there hasn't yet gotten them to the places they want to go to. You know, but I think that, you know, when you look at how you stay relevant also sometimes with the communications, the master's programs do a great job of putting you into those into the right light, the right experiences that you may not get. Again, we talked about earlier about the fact that you may be in a, you know, pretty narrow focused role. Getting a master's degree will help you get some of those experiences, some of the right programs in order to do that. I actually see even one of my former college friends, Danielle Yates, on the call too, who went to the same program as I. And I think that, you know, again, I went in intentionally knowing that my career was already going in a certain direction. This was going to help be an extra check mark, but there's specific things that I was looking for in the program. You know, when you're into your careers, I think you have a much better opportunity to use the information you learn in a master's program in your daily work. And the more you pull that in, the better your ability is to, you know, really get some consult on, you know, problems that you may be dealing with every single day. And honestly, really gain better knowledge into what's happening in the world as well. It builds your networks very easily too. If you have not gone to great things like ComNet and a whole lot of other have those opportunities, I'm very respectful to the fact that not everyone has an ability in their organizations to go to conferences, to do a lot of those things that do cost dollars. So you got to find ways to do that in master's programs. And Georgetown's is a really good one for communications.
And anything to add there?
Yeah, I like what Frank said. I totally agree. I have a master's. It was the right thing for me to do at the time, but it didn't land me in the place I wanted to be in for comms, right? My master's in international relations. So it was kind of like a different thing. It did help me figure out that intersection, but that was just my own need. I would say when I'm talking to candidates and looking at resumes, I'm really interested in that and your individual journey. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no check the box thing for me there. You know, it depends on the role. And I'm kind of interested in, like, you know, what are you telling me through your resume and your set of experiences? What were your own learnings? What motivates you? What's inspiring to you? And what would you bring, you know, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I'm always, you know, and Frank touched on this, kind of what's your unique value? Give me a little bit of that when you get down into interviews, right? It's way more about that for me than any sort of true qualification or school or program. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Frank and Anne. There have been several questions around data and how you're, either of you are using data to inform any of your decisions and priorities. So I'd love to hear you both talk a little bit about that.
And you want to tackle that one first?
Sure. I love the data questions. It's a data-oriented place. So we have a lot of it. It's really important in communications. It's really important across the organization. I will not make an effective point if I'm just talking about my gut on something. I mean, there are times I have to do that when the issue is gray and we haven't done something before. I'm going to give you my best advice as a communications professional. We may not have any data on it, but really, if I'm trying to advocate for any sort of strategic plan or a tactical approach, or trying something new, or hiring a particular type of person or skill set, like, you know, really all the analytics are my friend at that point. I would say also how we use it, because there's a ton coming in. A lot of us are dealing with, there's a fire hose of information. I was talking to some team members today about how they took some kind of live data about an ad campaign and quickly made optimizations. And that may not seem like a big deal, but that's exciting because that's exactly what we should be doing, right? That proves to, at least at Pew, the project teams and others we collaborate with, that we know what we're doing and we are pivoting in the best interest of like budget and resources and approach. So we provide a lot of reports. I provide reports to the board. I provide reports to the senior executive team. We provide a monthly report within communications for learning. But I think really that big next step is, what do you do with it? And if you're not taking those key findings, this has been a learning for me really over the past several months, and repeating them and doing a little roadshow kind of internally so people really hear and understand. And it's not enough to do it once. Sometimes you got to do it multiple times, you know, then those lessons are lost. So I feel like that's part of my responsibility, is to bring that discipline to bear. And it's something I'm always kind of thinking about, like, did we do enough with those findings? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, I can't tell you how many conversations I have won because you know, was able to put data behind something I'm saying. You know, one of the things we all know and face as a problem in the communication field is that everyone believes that they are the best communicators that exist, no matter what their particular roles are. You know, I've worked with many wonderfully talented doctors who can go into a brain and do things that I could not ever even imagine doing. But that will also tell me exactly how to do communications, you know, as if there wasn't a training behind what I've done versus what they're doing. And because of that, you end up arguing, you know, subjective points that, you know, don't always, you know, again, gut feeling versus gut feeling. And sometimes, you know, that gut feeling versus gut feeling is with the person that you report to, or your CEO or your president. And so you want to be in positions where if you're recommending something, it is here based on the statistics, this is why we need to do this. There are very few CEOs and managers and directors, whoever you report to, who can fight the case that here's the data. The data says we need to try this. The data says this is a better decision significantly versus something else, that won't lean toward that as the best option for the situation, as well as the fact, not only just making the case for whatever communication campaign that you're doing, resourcing is critical around the data points as well. Sometimes I don't believe we do a great job of quantifying the amount of work we do as communicators, so that it's clear that, you know, again, if people say, go and write something, you know, don't really understand how long that takes, or, you know, how much how many times they've said that across an entire year. It's a different situation for me to sit in front of whether it's my finance team or any of the teams that are even collecting work, to say, your team has, requested 57 urgent projects over the last 12 months. That is the most out of every unit that we have. We can't function that way. So we don't have the resources to do so. Or overall, year over year, we've increased from going to 400 projects to 700 projects, and we have not increased the actual resourcing on the team. So we can't sustain that. So either the decision has to be that we have to pull back on things, which is never something that people want to do, or we need to step up our resources to keep trying to meet the increase in demand that we have. And so data is the only way that conversation is going to get you far down the line. So it's extremely important to multiple fronts.
Great. Well, I'm going to take the next one from Liz's growing list, and that is sort of a two-parter. I think we're seeing a bunch of questions about what you would do differently in your journey. And also I'd add, what is a mistake that you've learned from, whether it's a comms risk that you took or a detour along the path that you wish you thought really wasn't helpful. Let's see, I think Frank, it's your turn to go first.
Okay. I'm always a hard person to ask what I would do differently, because if I did something differently, I may not be on this call today. So it's always hard for me to say that, just because every, obstacle really just is an opportunity for you to learn and be better. What makes me really good at the job is the fact that I have failed many times before, and now I've seen what happens when I walk down that road. And I think for me, that is, I would not advise people to ever think about, what is it that you can do differently? Because whether you are in the beginning of your career, the middle of your career, or further along than that in your career, there's still opportunities for you to change and make better decisions that will get you down the line. So, I've never been a fan of saying like I regret something, because I can talk about a lot of failures that were not great at the time, but it's those lessons that got me to where I am today. What was the second part of that question too?
Oh, I think it was, what would you have done differently, and what is something you've learned from a mistake that you've made? And I think you were touching on both of those. What do you think, Anne? You have anything in mind?
Yeah, I mean, what I would do differently, I think, and this is probably not what people were looking for, but I would actually have, when I had opportunities, taken more breaks professionally. I mean, I don't feel like I can do it now, and I don't want to now, but I think there were some periods where I felt like I had to do X when I could have let up a little bit, and it probably would have been good for me for many reasons. But so that probably doesn't really hit. It wasn't like a professional insight, but I would encourage people, if you have moments and you're feeling pretty burned out in life, if you can do it, try. You get a lot from that, and this has been a period where I know a lot of people are reevaluating that. I was talking to a friend last week who was decided to totally shift careers because she just got burned out, and it's happening for sure. A mistake I learned was very early in my career. I was an on-the-record spokesperson, and no one had really trained me to do that. I think everyone kind of thought someone else had done it. It wasn't like a mean thing. It just hadn't happened. So I took a media call and I gave an answer that I probably shouldn't have given. It was a little sarcastic, and it appeared on the front page of the paper the next day. And I learned a lot from that, really early in my career. And actually, it's informed my approach to media training. It's informed my approach to, kind of how we have to counsel and help people grow, because mistakes totally happen. Everyone has the best of intentions. No one goes into an interview hoping to say the wrong thing, but stuff happens. And so I've learned a lot from that personally, and I'm always kind of eager to sort of pay that forward with other people who are going to be in similar situations.
Yeah.
Next question. I'm giving you this. There's a lot around balancing and prioritizing within here. And there's two that are different issues, but I'm going to ask them both and you guys can answer. You can choose your own adventure with this question. So one is around, Frank, your reference of the landscape changing every 5 years or so, and balancing both keeping up to date on platforms and skills versus ensuring that you have people on your team to cover it. So that, how do you prioritize between the two of those? And then the second path of this adventure is around balancing the idea of the issuing statements with everything going out around in the world, like issuing statements versus coming up with solutions and communicating around them. So it's that, how do you balance your time and making sure that you're kind of hitting on what you need on that communications end of things. Throwing you for a loop, you can choose your path forward on this one. You can do both if you want, really, it's up to you.
Well, I guess one was mentioned toward me, so I'll go for that one. In terms of how do you stay on top of like digital platforms, there's really kind of twofold that I do. I can't stress enough the importance of continuous training. I am a constant learner. I will be, you know, at the end of my career, still trying to learn what is new. So you have to really keep people in the professional development realm. What we know today is not what we may know tomorrow, but we can learn and we can prepare for what's happening. And so, I spend time ensuring that I am either involved in different networks where I can go and do things like this and learn, listen to what are the experts in the field right now. I spend time when I don't know something, trying to just research it on my own and learn a little bit more about it. And also, that we have opportunities that of who you bring on the team. We make personnel decisions. And so as a lot of these new platforms come up, the schooling changes for those that are coming straight out of college or more junior in their careers. And that's a value that can be added to the team when, I didn't grow up with TikTok or those things yet. And so when you have someone who grows up and naturally is a part of it, you can pull them in. You look at interns and hiring individuals that have a little bit more experience there that can teach you something. I think those are ways that you can stay involved, as well as continue to understand how those digital platforms will evolve over time. And I think for me, that's an important part for, trying to stay up with the ever-changing, landscape that it is in communications. I'm actually curious what it is going to be in 5 years, because, if there's not TikTok, there's House Party now. And then there's, you got all these new platforms of communities that are being built. And I think the key is not to be a part of every single one, but to figure out what is the suite of ones that make your organization better, that you can effectively be a part of. There's nothing worse than actually joining a platform, doing bad at that platform, or not being consistent and posting content on that platform. It's better to be not on it at all than to kind of start that up and fail.
So I'll take the statements question. I think this is a really interesting one right now, and every organization is dealing with it, particularly so many who are joining the group tonight. And I'll just note, I think this is like a really new dynamic, right? When I first started out in my career, not to date myself, but like no one cared what my personal life was like. I didn't expect my company to say anything about anything going on in the world. There just wasn't that kind of expectation of corporate activism or CEO voices. It was kind of, we pay you, come in and do your job, and that was the culture many, many years ago. And it shifted, and actually talking about data, you can see the data, there's many groups who have it about particularly millennial generations and younger workers, now Gen Z, which is kind of starting to age up. This is super important to them, right? And for many people on this call, those of us who are mission driven and really want to work for organizations who are doing good in the world, and you want to wake up and feel that. So I think that's a shift. Depending on which organization you're in, it has to be authentic to that organization. Pew's not a place that's going to comment on everything, because we're not in everything. It has to align with our values and our investments and where we're going to put research and time or funding. And it doesn't mean we won't have an opinion or a point of view. I try to think about, and again, this is emerging. I try to think about the spectrum of ways we can get messages out. Not everything's a statement. I'm a believer in that. I know lots of people like statements. My point of view is not everything's a statement, but there are ways to share the organization's point of view that may feel more right. So I don't think it's one size fits all. As things happen in the world, I really try to reflect. I try to talk to a group of team members across Pew who may disagree with me. And in fact, I want them to push me, what do you think? It helps me evolve my thinking, and maybe I'm writing something and I send it to 5 different people. Like, how would you change this? What do you think about the words? That's, I think, the really tough work of communicators right now is just trying to think about all those angles. And I don't know if there's a get it right. I think there's the right approach, hopefully in the moment for your organization, that you feel good about as months go on, that you can live up to.
Great. Well, we're getting several other questions about data, and I think these probably are more about how you show results rather than how you make the case. You all talked a lot about how you make the case for building your team or doing things differently, but sort of what are those key performance indicators today? And that is, such an ongoing question in the PR world at large, but just wondering if you all are willing to share what some of your KPIs are, or at least how you think about that question.
Yeah, I can start. So it depends. Again, I oversee public relations and communications and marketing, so it kind of varies across. But what we all do is we all work for some sort of product or service. And so of course, whoever's the revenue generating unit normally gets is the easiest case. If you're fundraising, we raise as much dollars. If you're a product marketing, then we've sold these many things. What I've tried to do over the course of my career is to ensure that the communication efforts are tied to the ending results in whatever the dollar driven department we're serving is, because we serve everyone, but we're not as revenue generating, of course. However, it is a different conversation when I can say, we spent the X amount of hours on this particular presentation. We aided this that led to $100 million gift. That's if you don't have someone that has that conversation and tries to tie the things together, then it's easily overlooked. The people say, well, they didn't make the ask. Well, we wrote the ask, we designed the ask, we didn't just make a website. We considered what user experience really is and the statistics around what it was going to take for someone else to click this button versus this, which yielded this many results. It's tying your numbers back to whatever your revenue generating unit is, because then it makes it a lot easier to make the case.
Yeah, so for Pew, we're a global NGO. Our measures for the organization writ large have to do with informing, influencing, when I'm in conversations with my colleagues in programming across the organization, they want to know what communications has done to further their goals, whether that's advancing policy or reaching a certain set of people or informing people in Philadelphia about some grants we made. So there's that whole spectrum. So there's no really tight list. It varies. The KPIs vary based on what we're trying to do. I would say we use a model that's been with us for many years now, and I didn't create it, but we call it reach, engagement, influence. And I try to provide data across those 3 categories. Influence is qualitative, but if a policymaker has cited a Pew report in a speech, or we get cited in an editorial or in someone else's op-ed, then now I guess we're calling them guest essays according to the New York Times. These things really matter, and they show we move the needle. And I can tell a story about how the communications team was behind that from the very beginning. Some of those actions we're taking with media relations, you can't really quantify that, right? Okay, you reached out to 8 reporters. Well, one of them you've been cultivating for a year and a half, and now you have this terrific story that really moved the needle. Or we've been thinking about that advertising campaign for a long time, or that digital strategy for a long time, and look at how we learned about audiences and how they kind of convert into, things we want them to do. So I think that whole spectrum is really important. And I do vary my talking points and what I show based on what the objective is.
Great. Well, sadly, this hour has flown by.
Wow.
So I have one last question for you all. And it seems like we could maybe have you all back and fill another hour. I don't know. There's been just tons of interest. And I also want to thank Kareem for thinking quickly and getting us live on YouTube for our those who were patient and waited for us to find a solution to the license problem. So thanks for that. So this last question is like, what is the one take home you want to leave this very engaged audience with? The one thing that every communications professional can do right now today, no matter where they sit, to be a better sort of chief communications officer in the way they contribute, if not in their title. So what's your one thing? I'm going to call on Anne first.
Yeah, this is going to sound super cheesy, but like, we talked about unique value. I really want to see kind of what's your light. What are you bringing to the job besides fulfilling the kind of duties and responsibilities? Show me your approach, your thinking, your unique value, because everyone's got it. So kind of bring that forward. I think you can do that today. And then I'm going to cheat and say a second, but I think there's been such an interesting thread here about learning. And I'll underscore that again. I love what Frank said about it, but we're in an industry that is constantly evolving, so you can't stop learning. I think that's super important.
Yeah. Similar, of course, thoughts. The ability to be deliberate in your next actions, being deliberate in ensuring that your weaknesses become strengths. I can't, stress how important it is for you to understand where you fit into an organization, and then really just start finding ways to expand your horizons. If you are a writer and you really want to continue to move up the chain, then it's also about understanding what user experience is. I often have my teams to stay strategic. I try to ensure that at least once a year, we get together for a retreat and we cross-pollinate information, because how what happens on the user experience front in the digital realm of what's the new possibilities there should inspire my writers to think about how they're writing a little bit differently, for them to be able to say, oh, well, because we can highlight information in this particular way, now I want to pull a quote a different way. This is actually, I can now envision what's going to, where my words are going to land, and not be so narrow focused on, just the words being there. How do people consume them? And I think, we're all a part of connected to the entire realm of communications. And I think by you using using your ability right now to go to someone and say, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about your job. I want to learn a little bit more about your job. I don't spend time in this, but I want to learn more about that, will allow you to be strategic in what recommendations you can continue to make to the team. And again, as I said earlier, when you're looking, when as a CCO and whoever the head of the organization is, we're looking for the individuals who are going to be that. There's less people who are strategic than those who are strictly just, narrow focused on their job, and they're not actively trying to do more. I've always said that any job you have about 60 to 70% of that job is in the job description, if it's a good job description. The other 30 to 40% is up to you to decide. And it's up to you to make that job something that no one else can have. And we have to look for a completely different type of person than when we originally hired for the position, because now you've expanded the role so much. And I think when you aim to do that, you put yourself in a completely different conversation, a completely different realm, which will allow you to open up more doors along the way.
Wow. Thank you both so much. I know I am going to have to go back and digest this because I didn't get to spend enough time listening, and every word was really so rich. And so I just have to thank you both so much for sharing all of this with us. And thanks to this wonderful audience for all of your great questions. We hope you'll join us again on a ComNetDC event, and we hope you'll all take these insights and really power communications in your organization and get fired up. So I'm going to wish you all a great evening, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank